Taylor Page.
Taylor Page.
Maybe I'll
Your Honor, I do need to put a couple objections on the record.
I'm sorry?
I need to put objections to the testimony in the record. Do you want
You
the
need
approach
that.
to do that?
Do you do it in the presence of the jury or outside?
I don't think it'll hurt. It's whatever you want to do. If you want me to approach, I can do it.
Go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
Your Honor, I think I would like to renew the objections we made at the 702, 705 hearing. In addition, I would like to object. There are 48 potential FBI agents involved in this case. The FBI, per their policy, we requested those personnel records, which could be potentially exculpatory. They denied access to all of those. I believe that's a violation of the Michael Morton Act. I would ask that the court refuse to allow any of the FBI agents to testify in this case based on that. They require a 2E letter for you to get their personnel records. We went through the process of doing that, and they denied us any of those records. Obviously, with any Texas law enforcement officer, we would get those records directly from the district attorney, but the federal government just doesn't do what the states ask them to do. They don't have to, and we can't make it.
All right. Your objection is overruled. You may have a running objection.
Your Honor, I think there'll only be one other agent testify, but I would ask for the same.
So the same objection would apply to the second agent?
Yes.
Okay. Just remind me when that agent comes in.
Thank you, Your Honor. The other issue is when he testified at the 702, 705, I believe his testimony was that he did only perform.
Your Honor, I'm going to object this to having this discussion in front of the jury about things that happened at the hearing outside the presence of the jury.
Go to your room.
Previously sworn to testify truthfully. That's it. Please witness.
Mr. Berry.
Yes, sir. Mr. Page, would you please state your name and spell your first and last name for the court, please?
Yes, sir. My name is Taylor Page, spelled Taylorpage.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Page?
I'm a special agent with the FBI in Dallas.
So Special Agent Page, can you tell me a little bit about your background as far as how it was that you became a special agent with the FBI?
I've got a bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Worked in private sector for about 10 years before coming over to the Bureau. Nothing law enforcement related, but the Bureau has a history of hiring folks from a lot of different fields. So I went through the application process, and then everything that I've learned through the academy, and then since I've been an agent, obviously brought me to this point of being an investigator with the FBI then.
You talked about the academy. Where's the academy located?
Quantico, Virginia.
And what does that entail? About what kind of process?
It's about 5 months from start to finish at the academy. There's legal training, tactics, self-defense, firearms, everything that you would expect kind of in a police academy. Same type of things for FBI academy as well.
And were you a field agent before you do what you do now?
So I'm still a field agent. I'm assigned to the Dallas Violent Crimes Task Force. So it's going to be agents and task force officers from surrounding agencies that investigate primarily violent crimes, so carjackings, bank robberies, kidnappings. There's about 20 or so of us on that task force that specialize in those types of offenses. And then in addition to that, I have a certification within the FBI for the cellular analysis team. And so part of my role is to serve in that capacity as well.
Okay, and the cellular analysis team, does that have some type of a special acronym that goes with it?
Yeah, so Cellular Analysis Survey Team, or CAST, you'll hear it often referred to.
Okay, and tell me how, what do? You said that you work with these different types of violent offenses, including kidnappings. What does the Cellular Analysis Survey Team do?
So the CAST unit is different than the Violent Crimes Task Force. So I happen to be a CAST asset that just sits on that Violent Crimes Task Force. But this CAST unit within the FBI, again, there's about 100 or so of us spaced throughout the country. We specialize in the analysis of cellular records. And oftentimes, to your question, if there is something like an Amber Alert or a mass casualty event or something that requires a big law enforcement response, if there's something that's going to have a cellular component to it, a lot of the times you're going to see a CAST asset that gets dispatched to that command post or that location.
And we're talking about command posts. Explain what you mean by a command post.
So a command post is oftentimes set up by law enforcement in response to usually a threat to life type situation that's occurring. It's oftentimes set up in an area very close to where the actual crime may have occurred. So while our office is in Dallas, if there's a situation that occurs in a different part of North Texas, we may send a command post or establish a command post in an area nearer to that so that the law enforcement response can be centralized to that immediate area.
And how is it that you do that? Do you pitch a tent out there? How does it happen?
So the FBI has a mobile command post. Several agencies I know around North Texas also have mobile command posts. It's a giant semi-trailer that will pull up to the scene, and it allows us access to some of our equipment and technology that we would otherwise have at our headquarters division, and that isn't necessarily always available right there in the field. But again, it's a good centralized spot for the law enforcement response to be concentrated.
And when a crime occurs, like a kidnapping, and there's somebody missing that you're trying to locate, what kind of things do you do to try to make that happen?
There's a lot of things that can be done from a law enforcement perspective. No two situations are the same. Certain, again, mass casualty type events, things like that where the subject of that may already be deceased. Sometimes the law enforcement response is to uncover what was going on with that person before they committed that mass casualty event. If it's something like an Amber Alert or a missing kid, the number one priority is to find the missing kid. And especially from the CAST perspective, a lot of times there's cellular records that could become relevant, especially in a world where most folks have cell phones. If it's able to be determined what cell phone may be of relevance to that investigation, we're going to try to help identify that device and then locate it with the expectation that maybe that missing kid is near that device.
And were you called to come to the scene where a girl by the name of Athena Strand went missing on November the 30th of 2022?
Yes, I was the second CAST agent that went there. One of my colleagues, Agent Sedwick, was the first CAST agent that responded to the scene, and then I arrived, I think, the second day to help him out.
And when you arrived that second day, so you say the second day, did you arrive on December 1st or December 2nd?
I believe I was there December 1st, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so the day after, and then if the arrest took place on December the 2nd, would that be correct?
I think that sounds correct.
All right. So as agents, you and Mr. Sedwick, or Special Agent Sedwick, are you collecting certain information that you can then analyze?
Yes. Again, it's all dependent on what's happening in that particular situation. If, again, there's cellular records that appear that they're going to be of relevance, we will reach out directly to those cell providers, so Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and try to explain to them, hey, here's what we've got going on, and we'll make what are called exigent requests for information. So things that are not accompanied with a warrant at that time. There is an immediate threat to life that's going on, and we're trying to mitigate that as best we can. So we make the request in good faith to those cell providers that, hey, we believe these records could be helpful in locating or identifying this missing person.
Now, in this particular case, was the child still missing when you arrived?
Yes, sir.
And was there any knowledge one way or the other as to whether the child was still alive or not?
We had no indication of her status at that time.
So did that qualify then for these exigent requests that you're making to different phone companies and different social media carriers, things like that?
Yes, sir.
And I mean, there's a commonly known or a common term that's out there called geofencing. Can you kind of explain what that means?
Yeah, so geofencing, just the general concept of a geofence is that there's a particular area where something happened. And then if you draw basically a radius around that, say 400 meters, you could potentially identify devices that fall within that radius. It's done in order to identify possibly unidentifiable persons that may have been present in that area by way of cellular connectivity oftentimes. Certain geofences are not only related to cell phone connectivity, there's other types of geospatial geofences that can be done that may be GPS related, but the general concept of it is just that there is a known quantity or a known event and then a radius that you want to establish around that area to identify the devices that were present in that spot.
And are you able to limit that to certain times and parameters?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you do that in this particular case?
We did.
Okay. Now, when you go to the scene out there, or really any scene of a missing child, who are the first people that you are often tasked to look at and look at their mobile devices?
Usually it's the parents or close family that may be living with that person. So a lot of times it's not even necessarily that that person is a suspect per se, but you also want to get corroboration for statements that those folks may be making to law enforcement. So if a parent says, I was at work all day, if you get the phone records for that person, you could pretty easily identify, depending on how far away they live from their work, you could potentially identify that, yes, they were at work that day and their statements are consistent, as opposed to someone whose phone was not near their office that day, then maybe the statements that they made that they were at work could be more concerning.
And was that done in this particular case with regard to the missing child, Athena Strand?
Yes, sir. I believe Special Agent Sedwick started that process.
Okay. Now, when you got there and you became involved in this process, was there another phone number that was identified as being a potential point of interest that y'all wanted to obtain some records related to?
So there were a couple things that took place. We did a geofence to T-Mobile, and there was a device that was identified within that geofence. That device became of interest for us. Second to that, there was a phone number for Mr. Horner that was also identified, and that became more relevant as the command post situation started to unfold.
Okay. And with regard to that, did you obtain these exigent records related to that phone number for Mr. Horner?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And based upon reviewing those records, are you able to determine whether the device that is generating those records is moving or not moving based upon your analysis of that device?
We can usually get to a pretty quick conclusion about whether a device is movement or stationary based on those records. Yes, sir.
And with regard to this particular device, did you find that this device was at times stationary?
We did.
And that then it would move some and then be stationary again for certain periods of time?
That particular device associated with Mr. Horner, yes, as well as the device, the second device that was within that T-Mobile geofence. We saw consistent movement and stops for both of those devices.
And are those two devices moving at the same places and stopping at the same place?
Generally, yes. That would be my overarching conclusion, that they were generally moving together. There are subsets of information within there where there would be gaps of information for the phone number associated to Mr. Horner that the other device in that T-Mobile geofence could kind of fill in the gap of what those movement times might have been. But generally, for the time period that we were looking at, both devices appeared to be moving together.
Now, let me ask you this. If a person turns off their...
Yeah, we approach.
Yes. Now, if one of the types of devices that you may be looking at, cell phones,
Yes, sir.
okay? There are also sometimes GPS or cell phones even that are embedded within vehicles.
Modems, more to that point, yes, sir.
Okay. So explain to the jury what a modem is.
So a modem could be something that's got, in this particular case, cellular connectivity. So it's a mobile modem to provide internet access, but that internet access is provided via the cellular network. So it's not a hardwire internet connection like you might have at your house on your home router. It's transportable. It's usually a battery-powered thing, but it connects to the cellular network in the same way your phone does in order to provide internet service to a particular device. So it's not a phone, but it provides internet to another mobile device.
So if my car that I'm driving down the road has one of these modems in it, and I also have a cell phone while I'm driving down the road, are both of those essentially going to be moving at the same time?
Your phone would very likely have its own SIM card, but yes, you would see movement on both devices.
And if then I turned off my phone, or I took the SIM card out, or whatever it was that I did, would then that keep that particular device from communicating with the cellular network?
Yes, correct. If a cell phone were powered down, you would see a gap in communications with the network during that time period.
Okay. But my car, unless there's some way I disable it, would continue to connect?
I would expect that it would, yes, sir.
Right. And is that the type of thing that you're talking about?
In this particular case, it's a modem, and yes, that device maintained connectivity.
Even though the phone stopped communicating?
That's correct.
All right. And so, based upon the information that you were receiving for these two devices, were you able to determine potential points where maybe searches might need to be done based upon areas where these two devices were stopping and stationary for some period of time?
Yes, sir, we did.
And were you familiar with the location? I'm not asking you to give an address, just asking if you know the location where Athena Strand body was ultimately located.
I don't know the exact address, but I am familiar with it, yes, sir.
And based upon the information that you had from these two devices, did you target that location as a place that needed to be searched?
We did.
Okay. And was that information communicated through the command post to officers in the field prior to her body ever being located?
It was.
Now, many officers were all called to look at a particular location during that same period of time, correct?
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
And so was there enough bodies to then go out and look at all these different areas where you're saying we need to look here, we need to look here, we need to look here?
It can become a big strain on resources when you're trying to dispatch law enforcement to multiple spots. So to answer your question, I don't know exactly what personnel were assigned to which area, but again, we did identify the location where her body was ultimately located as one of the areas to be searched.
And that location was actually identified in advance by some period of time of when she was actually located. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
But because the resources were diverted to a different location, that area was never able to be searched prior to her body being located. Is that right?
I don't think it was searched thoroughly. The area that we identified was a body of water, and obviously if the body is not readily viewable on the top of the water, and especially given certain times of day, darkness would be a factor in that as well. So yeah, if you don't have adequate personnel to do a proper search of that spot, you may not find what you're looking for at that initial search.
So if officers had been available to thoroughly search that location,
Objection, speculation.
Let me hear the question.
is it your opinion that if officers had been available to thoroughly search those locations, that her body could have been located earlier in the day?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
With regard to your work, you said you were working with Mr. Sedwick, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And he is also a member of this CAS team.
Yes, sir.
And then, does the CAS team often, in preparation for a trial like this, or to sort of analyze the data that you have, do they prepare something called a cast analysis?
We do, yes, sir.
Okay, and tell me what a cast analysis is.
It's oftentimes going to be centered around cellular records, as you might expect, but then it's going to have information related to activity of the cell phones that are cellular devices that are being analyzed, and then that activity is going to be mapped in concert with known events related to a particular crime. Just because the mapping of a phone or a cellular item itself isn't necessarily meaningful unless you have locations of relevance as it relates to the crime that's being charged.
And are there potentially other devices that could be used to corroborate the modem in the vehicle as well as the cell phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would package scanner potentially be something like that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, would geolocation data on a video be something like that?
That would also assist in that, yes, sir.
And so if those things also corroborated those points of data you already had, that would be something that might go into the CAS analysis.
Yes, sir.
Objection, lead.
Don't lead your witness.
Now, with regard to this particular case, was a CAS analysis done?
It was.
And who was the officer that did that CAS analysis?
Special Agent Sedwick.
And with regard to your part in that, did you act as a technical reviewer of that?
A peer review, yes, sir.
Okay. And, but it would be Agent Sedwick that would be the one to actually present that analysis, correct?
That's correct.
Pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir.
Good to see you again.
Yes, sir.
Just one question. So, as far as that analysis goes, your contribution was to request the geofence data from T-Mobile.
So the initial geofence request was done by me, and then once the phone number was identified as the result of that geofence, as well as the phone number associated with Mr. Horner, both of those exigent requests were also made by me to T-Mobile.
Okay. And then you're talking about from this command center, you're comparing data as it comes in with Agent Sedwick.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Nothing further to this witness, Your Honor.
May Agent Page be excused subject to any potential recall?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, I need a break. Okay? Give me 15 minutes and we'll start back up at 5 minutes to 3, okay?